Voilà. Hello, this afternoon we'll continue our journey toward accessible ebooks with Mobilis. Marion Berthaud is a CEO of Mobilis and David Rondello is the CTO of the company. Mobilis is a French company and they will present their experience on accessible school books today with a particular focus on dyslexia. So I have been personally in touch with Marion for several years now, since Lab has been created, and she helped us study the features that we should add to reading systems for dyslexic people, and things that we are installing step after step on Thorium Reader, and we will continue working together for dyslexic people, dyslexic young people especially. But today, let's focus on school books. And so thank you, Marion, to present this.
Thank you very much, Laurent. So today we are talking about textbook. Textbook, why is it a question to talk about textbooks? What is it? Why is it different from any other kind of book? Textbooks are different because of several differences. The first is that it is a complex page, and we're going to see how complex it can be. But there's another question about textbooks. It is because you need them to learn. And when you're a child and you've got difficulties to learn because your brain is built in a certain way, because you've got some dyslexic issues, some dyspraxic issues, some cognitive impairments, you have already difficulties to learn, and then with textbooks it is much more difficult. So our purpose is to bring solutions in order to help people with dyslexia to be able to read a textbooks as everybody else. So first of all, I would like to introduce what is dyslexia. If there's some French people in the room, I'm going to show you, to present you an example of difficulty for dyslexic people. So I hope you can see my screen here. Here, you've got an illustration in French, well, actually it is French, of how dyslexic people may have difficulties to read a very simple exercise. Here you've got some difficulties with decoding the text. For instance, here you've got some difficulties in French, Monsieur et Madame Arnaud. So it means that the dyslexic people, they have difficulty to segmentate correctly the sentences, the words. They have difficulties to read the good letter at the right place. They have also difficulties in the whole page, meaning that sometimes on the second exercise here, you've got some difficulties if you try to read it normally from left to right. But if you read it from top to down, you will begin to understand. Typically, dyslexic people, sometimes they don't really know where to put their eyes, how to focus on what is important or not. And typically, when you cannot read your book, you cannot learn. It's as simple as that. David, have you got some question for me about dyslexic people?
Yeah, do you know exactly how many people are suffering from this kind of disabilities?
In the whole world, the WHO organization say that there's approximately 5% of the population in all the earth, each countries, that are dyslexic. But actually, there's more people that have difficulties to read, because there's not only dyslexia, it can be some other attention difficulties. So here in France, we are used to saying that there's one or two children per class, per group of school. So it's not few people only. Some other study declared that in the 6th grade, when normally you can read automatically, there's 20% of a group of age that has difficulties to read and that hasn't already optimized the process of reading.
Okay, and perhaps everybody as a child may have some difficulties. Is it not just something that you say because you have some difficulties at school?
Yes, there's a lot of people thinking that it's only, well, you need to make efforts and you will succeed. Actually, it is a handicap and it is recognized as a handicap. So it is really a difficulty to learn how to read and not a difficulty to understand things or to memorize or you've got same intellectual possibility as other people. So it is really a question of helping someone who has an impairment. Like if you are short-sighted, you need glass. It is exactly the same. When you're dyslexic, you need help in order to learn how to read. And your textbooks typically is designed to help you to learn, and they must be accessible.
Okay, and cannot you fix it when you are a child, the dyslexia?
Yes, actually, you stay dyslexic as long as you are, well, all your life. It's not a disease that you can be cured, but you can learn how to read. It means that it is possible to train, and in order to do that, there's some solution, and solutions, they are known. I mean, people already know them, the science know them, they are used by speech therapists. And so the specialists, they know how to help a child to read correctly. The difficulty is that it takes a long time to adapt all the texts, to put some colors, to cut, to pause, to narrate, to vocalize the text. So because of that, the idea is that books that are used at school, and precisely textbooks, they should integrate natively some kind of helps in order to help dyslexic people to read. And that is the next step for accessibility. We have been working a lot on the accessibility of literature books. Textbooks, it is much more difficult because of the complexity of the page, but still, this is the next step in order to help the children to read their textbooks, and at the end to know how to read without any help.
So you already picked some solution in order for children to read. What are exactly these solutions? And
yeah,
from the simplest to the more complex?
Yes, there's a lot of different solutions. So I'm going to show you some slides. I'm very sorry because they are in French. It is a study for textbooks for young about 7 years old students. Just a second. Oops, where is it? Yes, here. Oops. So here you will see a typical textbooks, as I said, from 7 years old approximately. And at 7 years old in France, the child begins to learn how to read. It is at 6 or 7 years old that you begin to read how to learn how to read. Sorry. So here is a classical page, and as you see, there's a lot of different exercise on the same page. One thing that can be done is to separate things and to put them in a linear mode. Here you've got the first exercise, so you put the first exercise on one page, and then the second one on the second page, etc., etc., or on a linear mode with a scroll, but not on columns like that, because for the children, to help him to know where to go next, it is much more easier for them to go from top to down. So here it is the case. One exercise, one screen or one column at once. Another way to help them, it is to lighten the text, meaning to put some space between letters, between words, between lines. This has been typically proved by some scientists like Johannes Ziegler, for instance, and it is really important because for some dyslexic people, the letters, they come and they're like if they were upside down, I mean, mixed, and you cannot decode them. So if you put more space between letters, words, lines, it is really an help for them. And you can also be very careful of the meaning of each sentence. A line shouldn't cut a meaning. What is called the unit of meaning. The units of meaning, it is the group of words that should be read all together in order to be really understandable by the young. So this is called désencombrement perceptif, perceptive lighten, something like that. Another possibility is obviously to be able to grow, to enhance the size of the font. Digital tools, digital books help obviously with this question of size. And so if you were very, well, I know that on the print version of a textbooks, there is something difficult is to put everything on the one page. Here you haven't got these constraints anymore. So don't put too many things on the same screen. Lighten the screen and use the scroll when you need to have more place, more thing. Another thing that is help for dyslexic people is about fonts. There's some specific fonts like OpenDis, which is an open source font. This font has the specificity that it is like a heavy font, like if there was a gravity, and it helps not to have confusion between some symmetric letters, like the P and the B, or the Q and the P and the B, for instance. So it might help, but it doesn't help everybody. It helps approximately 1/3 young. So it means that what is important is to suggest different fonts, but to let the user, the reader, choose what he needs, what he is comfortable with. And you don't need to have, I don't know, 20, 25 different fonts. Only a choice between 2 and 3, it's enough. You've got also the question of the pictures. The pictures on textbooks are very useful to help people to understand, but sometimes some pictures are only there to be lovely on the page, to animate the page. Those pictures may disturb the young. So what is suggested is to be able to not make them visible. Help me, David, to hide them. So one solution is to hide them. It's an option for the reader to hide or not to hide. You can also use some indication. When there's an indication, the young click on, and then he will see the picture. So it will not disturb him automatically. You've got also, with the digital tools, the possibility to enhance some combination of letters. For instance, here in France, we've got those syllables that are very important to understand the word. So in order to help the reader to understand the word, we use one color for the first syllable, another color for the second syllable. You can also enhance some sounds. So here it is the phonemes that are enhanced. The k, q, is k, an is on, and the d is not sounded. So the word is quand, the French word for when. So the solution here is to make the possibility for the child to choose one or another way to, depending on what he needs, a way to enhance some of the sounds or some of the syllables. And at last but not at least, the audio. The audio is an excellent support to help dyslexic children. When you cannot do anything as an accessible solution, at least do the audio, meaning that the possibility to hear what is written will help the dyslexic people to understand even if they cannot read. So the audio is a wonderful way to enhance your book and to put it in an accessible way.
Okay, so we have seen a lot of announcements to be added to the books, to the school books. What is the best way to do this? I mean, is it something as a publisher or as a distributor I have to do in my own tools, or is there any risk associated with this strategy?
Yes, typically there's some risk, because if you try to do it on your own in a proprietary environment, the risk is that the child will not be able to access to your solution, because it will be a dedicated solution in an environment dedicated to that. So one of the main risk when you talk about accessibility is to enrich your resources, but forget the way the reader is going to access to it. The way the reader is going to access to the resource should be also accessible. It means that, for instance, it is a mess for some parents to find the right resources, even if the resources is enriched, even if the resources has been completed with audio. But for this book, it is that, in that website. For this other book, it is in that app. For this other book, it is somewhere else. So the idea, and that's why we work with the EDR Lab, it is to converge on the same standard of accessibility in EPUB 3, respecting very strictly
standards.
The standards, yeah, thank you. And so the solution there exists. And typically what we do here is to explain to publishers how to put some accessibility in their book without changing really the book, without changing the lines, the words in the book. And in that case, you can adapt the resource, the book, even from a printed book, from the PDF, and you can adapt it and put it in a web page with some tools, with some options directly activatable by the reader, directly inside the book in an environment that is standard.
Okay, so it seems very easy and helpful for children, but as always, as a publisher, my planning is very tight. So is there any risk of doing too much work or delay? Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I need to explain now how we do that. Just a second, I'm going to share again my screen. Sorry. So what is difficult in that circuit? What takes time? It is the narration. Because when you narrate the book, well, you need a minimum time that cannot be reduced just to let the time to the narrator to do his job. So we have identified some different solutions, and here I present you a solution from a partner we have in Sweden. His name is ILT. And this is what they do. This is the secret they have put in order to respond to the expectations of publishers. You've got the school book of the publisher, and the school book of the publisher, for instance, is modified. And so there's a new article in the school book. The idea is that the digital school book is updated. Then there's an alert in our system that identifies precisely what needs to be narrated, what is new, what is different. And it is sent to the narrator and to our tools that enrich the text, like the syllabus, like everything we've done already. And then it is sent back into the data warehouse where the digital books are stored. And then the digital book is updated. So this is a circuit that is relevant for the workflow of the publisher. Let me show you a little film on how it works. Excuse me, just a second. Yes. Okay. So, great. So the solution that has been built here, you've got the titles, so all the books that need to be narrated, and then you've got the different articles that needed to be narrated, and the status, those who are already published, disabled, those who are in progress. And when the narrator is solicited, he has all the articles that he needs to narrate. And then after the narration, the article is sent back to the publisher. So here it is with the Glierups publisher in Sweden, as I said. And this, the way it is done is made in order to limit at the maximum everything that needs to be done by the publisher. The first step is to have a digital book. So first of all, we need, when the publisher has no digital solution, only the PDF book, there's a first step, which is to turn it into a web page textbook. And then from this step, you can have this circuit.
Okay, but let's say I'm still a publisher. Why do I have to put that in place? I mean, there are some associations, there are some parents and so on. Maybe they can do that.
Yes, you're right. Actually, there's a law in France, but in Europe as well, and I think it's the case in the whole world, where when the publisher doesn't publish a book within an accessible version, there's an exception that allows an organization like an association to adapt to one handicap. For instance, in Braille, a book. There are already some associations that do things like that. For instance, I want to talk about two associations. One is Bookin. Bookin is an association that provides to dyslexic people some tools in order to automatically narrate with an artificial voice, synthetic voice, the textbooks of publishers, so through the PDF. This is a solution that implies to the reader to have someone to help him. I mean, a parent, for instance, or an AVS, an auxiliaire de vie scolaire, which is someone who is dedicated to help the child to do his homework, for instance. So the solution cannot be done by the dyslexic himself. He needs to have someone with him. So Bookin is an association that do that, for instance. Another association I want to quote is the Le Cartable Fantastique in France. They are dedicated most for dyspraxic children. Dyspraxia is disorder focus on the gesture, on the way to when you put your shoes, for instance, the way you manage the movement and sometimes the movement of your eyes, for instance. So they've got a lot of difficulties. I'm going to share you some examples. Just a second. Yes. Oops, sorry. Not sure you see my screen.
We see you, in fact.
See, okay. sorry. Yes, here. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Here you've got from the textbook a mathematic exercise, a geometric exercise. Typically, this kind of exercise can just can't be done by a dyspraxic student. It is too difficult to analyze. There's too many things, too many forms, too many. So one of the problems of the cognitive impairments is that it is a difficulty to learn. So when you've got an exercise that helps you to learn something, it might be in an area where you've got already difficulties in. So to make accessible things, it can be difficult. Some of exercise are typically not done by those kind of association. This kind of association, she does also, for instance, that kind of adaptation. So here you've got the exercise when you need to explain what kind of plus, multiply, minus should be first. So you need to select what operation is the first in the operation. So here, typically, this exercise has been entirely developed into an interactive way. So there's a lot of works that are done by association like that. The difficulty for them is that did you see? No, you don't see. Sorry.
Not yet.
Sorry. I want to show you a typical page photo. C'est où photo? Just a second, excuse me.
No problem. As you are searching,
Yes, okay.
we have some question afterwards.
Yeah. Non, c'est pas celui-là. C'est pas celui-là. Whatever. Let's try to explain you on this page. Whatever. Here you've got a typical page of a textbook. And what is difficult in this textbook is that there's a lot of blocks everywhere. So what is done by those kind of association, like I told you about Cartable Fantastique, is that they are cutting all the page into some blocks, and they specify each type of block. Here is a text, here is little quotation, here is an exercise, here is something else, etc., etc. So what is difficult for them is to take the PDF and to have different kind of block, and then to adapt each block. Our hope is that one day this kind of work will be done directly in the book. We have an illustration here of what can be done. Oops, sorry, photo, film. Here you've got, do you see my screen? Yeah?
Yes, it's coming.
The video, okay. So here you can see a typical double page in the textbooks. Everything is well, there's column, there's a lot of words on each, there's a lot of a density of text. If you turn it into blocks, and each block, you put some options to read them. here you've got the same text, but with some options, like I said, the size of the font, but also the meaning of some explanations, some definitions, some audio solution, like on écartait les orteils. You can't hear, but I hear the book saying on écartait les orteils. So typically, this kind of solution is to enhance a single book, a normal book, into a book with all the options I've already talked about. Yes, you said you had question.
Yeah,
David.
maybe there's an interesting question about the fixed layout and what are the possibilities within this kind of layout, especially when you know that you cannot normally change the font or the line spacing.
Well, actually, there's some solution even if the fixed layout, in order to help the children, the reader to change the font, to change the size. Obviously, you need to rethink your file, your fixed layout file, in order to allow that. This is what we already do with some literature books in fixed layout, and directly inside the EPUB, you've got the functionality, the what we call the frog functionalities, like as we've seen the colors, the syllabs, and so on. And so it isn't because it is in the fixed layout format that you cannot change anything. It only means that you will not be able to change it with the classical tools within the reader. But you can put some functionalities directly inside the book. So it is possible even in fixed layout. Obviously, it is also possible in a reflow format.
Okay. We have also another question about the text-to-speech technology, which is providing by some reading application. So is this will make human narration something of the past?
Yes, it will one day. Why do I say one day? We have done tests on with a synthetic voice with incredible results, really, really good results on literature. The problem with textbooks is that they are often, for instance, in science or in mathematics, you've got some formulas, you've got some equation, you've got a lot of things, and for the moment, so far, we have measured that it takes more time to check whether everything is okay with a synthetic voice than to narrate manually with a vocal voice. There's another thing that, another reason, it is the question of the age of the student. Our experimentations prove that till the age of 14 in France, they prefer natural voice. After, at 15 and above, sometimes they can prefer a synthetic voice. And the way they are comfortable with the voice is directly in correlation with their adoption of the system, with the usage they're going to do. For instance, still with ILT, we have that solution with the two possibility, synthesis and natural voice. Just a second. Still on the same book. So here you've got an option, and you can have the synthesis voice or the the natural voice. And we can have some statistics on the usage on that. And so far, young children, they typically prefer the natural voice.
Okay. We have also a more technical question about the metadata. So the question is, how do you describe the accessibility options in the metadata, like Onyx, so that the reseller can sell them and the customers can find them?
Yeah, it is very important. Like I said previously, the question of the accessibility to the resource, to find the resource. So you're right, there's some metadata that can be put in the Onyx in order to help the librarians to find books that have been already put in an accessible way. The
With
books that have, yes, those options. So it is very important, but it is not really used so far. And librarians, they need to be trained, and there's still a lot of work to do in order to explain and to show how to find books with accessibility. So far, we in Mobidis we have decided to show to the users some libraries within digital libraries within books, frog books, so books with frog features, so that they will have no difficulty to access to them. They will find all the books they want in the same environment.
Laurent speaking. I will just add that I was looking at the Onyx code list 196, which is the accessibility list. Yeah. And I found that there is one which is dyslexia readability, which is exactly what you have described with specialized font, character, line spacing, etc. So in the book. And there is another one for synchronized pre-recorded audio for media overlays, and another one for text-to-speech hinting provided, meaning that the text-to-speech is optimized via the provision of lexicon. So there are 3 metadata that are very useful for dyslexic people that can be embedded in the Onyx code base.
So the next step with these metadatas is to use them and to feed them first, and to learn to teach to librarians how to use them. Yes, David, other questions?
Yeah, so the question is, you speak about librarians, but what about booksellers? Can they sell to the reader?
What, textbooks or accessible books in general?
I guess it's accessible books.
Accessible books. Okay. So when we talk about accessible books, and especially in our format frog books, it is EPUB. So it is the same, typically the same circuit of distribution as any EPUB 3 book. When we talk about textbooks, it's much more difficult. For the moment, all the publishers, well, in France, they distribute their books into their own channels, and so the secret of each publisher should be fully respected. So typically what we do with Glerups in Sweden is that the book is already is made with a minimum level of accessibility with the synthetic voice typically, and then if the reader, if the student is in a school that is a member of ILT, has subscribed to ILT, in that case, there's a second level of accessibility with the oral voice, with all the enrichments that can be done in the book. So in that case, the book is sold by the same bookseller as usual, but if the client is a subscriptor of in that case in ILT, then he will have access to another level of accessibility within the same book.
Which is linked, I guess, to the production costs and so on. So the question is how to support these costs as a publisher, as a distributor, and so on.
Well, in that last case, when I talk about this ILT circuit, the idea is that the cost of the higher level of accessibility is handled directly by the producer of the accessibility, so by Mobilis or by ILT. So the idea is that the cost is split between the normal accessibility, the first level of accessibility that is in the book with some classical function like the size, for instance, or the font. And then the second level of accessibility is handled, the costs are handled by the accessibility supplier. And in that case, it means that it is easy, affordable for the publisher to bring accessibility and to offer to allow all the people to read his books, and not only the reader without any disabilities.
Okay, I guess you. Oh, there is a new question. Sorry. No, sorry. You talk about several levels of accessibility. So, where do we stop the accessibility level? I mean, is there any limit to that?
Between the two levels of accessibility, you mean?
I mean, as a publisher, if I want to put some accessibility in my books, where do I up to what level do I have to go?
It depends on what you want to do. For me, the first minimum level of accessibility is to authorize the reader to enhance the display as he wants, meaning to have the size that he wants, the font that he wants. But this is really the minimum. And for me, the second step is the audio. The second step is the audio is a wonderful way, and it is not a big deal now to narrate and to synchronize with the text. It is really easy to do, and it really helps. For me, the next step is to think about how to vocalize the text, and the step after is to have all the frog options that already exist.
You just said new words. Frog. What is frog?
Frog is it is a short term to talk about free your cognition, free your cog, frog. So frog is the name we give to all the options that make books accessible for dyslexic disorders, for cognitive disorders. So all the features that I have already shown to you are frog features, and in each case we can do specific analysis to understand what kind of level of accessibility is needed. It's not the same when you're talking to about a book for young people or for older, for foreign language or natural language, for etc. etc. There's a level of accessibility that can be done differently in each situation.
Okay, we didn't speak about laws and regulation. Is there something about the accessibility and what has to be done?
Yes, there's a lot of things to talk about that. I think there's on other session they have been talking a lot about what kind of obligation, legal obligation. My position is that the legal obligation are going to be up and more. I mean, typically here in France, for instance, the national education puts more and more expectations on publishers on the level of accessibility. So in less than 5 years, probably there will be more and more obligation on that. For the moment, the obligation is, for me, is not enough, because I think it is possible to really enhance the text and really make them accessible for those who needs them, and all the publishers should get that ambitious.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat.
Perhaps the last thing about why it is important to do that. You must understand that teachers, they spend a lot of time working your books, your textbooks, copy, paste, colored. They do a lot of things with. Some of them record some passage, some paragraph, in order to give them to their students. So for a teacher, having a textbook that is already accessible, that bring with him with its own accessibility, it means de gagner du temps, to save their time, and to be really able to do a class with a lot of people, a lot of students, and some are with disabilities, some of them are not, but in an inclusive way. So it is really a competitive advantage to have an accessible book, a textbook that has its own accessibility within. I hope I have convinced you that it is important to do so. Our students, our dyslexic students all over the world, they need to be able to read as everybody in the textbooks where they have to learn, and there's some solution now on. So what are we waiting for? Let's do it.
So no, we don't wait. We are moving forward. So thank you very much, Marion. I will just add that when we compare the issue of the blind people and the issue of the dyslexic people versus books, we see that for blind people, the solution is semantics, structure of the content, and narration. So for the talking books, when they want to go a step further. And for dyslexic people, it's semantics, it's narration, and it's layout. A lot of issues with layout. So a third level. And what we are trying now to solve is this third level, because semantics, we know how to do it, XHTML, ARIA, etc. Well, technically it's solved. Now we just have to do it. Narration, it's not so bad. It's a bit expensive. TTS makes something. Well, it's already almost solved.
In progress.
In progress, but layout, they are still to be studied. What is the best user experience? What goes inside the book and what goes inside the reading application? What is the balance of those? All this, we have to study that. And so, so we are in the middle of the road at the moment. We are moving forward. For example, Thorium Reader. Thorium Reader has already spaces, flexible spaces for words, letters, lines, font size, for sure. The font, you can choose it. You can have a dyslexic font. It's true for Thorium Reader and all the Radium mobile applications, by the way. And now, just new, we've got audio, TTS, and a media overlay, meaning human narration. So we are at step 2, I would say. But now we are next steps to go. Alternate colors for different lines, guided rulers, the question of hiding images or not. at the will of the reader.
The reader.
It's a question. Should it be embedded? Should there be something embedded in the book so that some images can be hidden, some images are not because they are very important to the understanding of the book? So there are still many questions mixing content and layout and reading applications. So let's move on this. And I hope that we will have next year news about successes of ebook plus reading apps in the dyslexic world.
Yes, we will.
So David, thank you very much for the moderation.
Thank you.
And I say everybody, oh yes, we see you because you are the center of the screen, Mario. you are the on Zoom. It's called the star. So you don't. Nobody sees me at the moment. So have a good evening, everybody, and see you tomorrow for the last sessions of the DPS. 2 last webinars tomorrow. Don't miss it. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.